before I forget, Hannah, are you responsible for those old leaflets and folders and things like that? The things that come from the International Society of Agriculture.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, we had a whole box of stuff at the Green Fair, various pamphlets. Yeah, there we go. Pamphlets, is that your stuff? Is that your responsibility?
I can hold on to it for any next events for the tree board or the city. I'll just put it back in my office when I get in tomorrow.
There's also the little plastic thing for displaying them and the Arbor Day flag. That's it.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Does anybody want to offer a short reflection of trees? Relevant today? Shall we do introductions? There's few people here that we don't always see. So I'm Dick Homestead. I am current chair of the tree board.
I'm Doug Strugel. I'm a tree board member.
I'm Riley Bushnell. I'm the assistant.
Steve Bennett, planning director for the city.
Betsy Ormond, I'm just checking things out.
Betsy.
Margaret Bird, member of the tree board.
I'm Mark Phillips. I'm fly the tree board member. Talking for Richard as mayor. So see how that goes. I was a former council member here, and as such was a liaison to the tree board. So I was following pretty close to the activity of the tree board, but it's pretty stale the last year and a half. So I'll have to try to get updated.
We call that a vacation from your civic service. You're fresh and ready to go.
John Brew, Stewardship Foundation.
Sandy?
Sandy LeVar, tree board member.
Hannah Swanson, city arborist.
Okay. And did someone say Larry is online or?
Yeah, he's Grace is hand.
So you got an attendee.
There are 5. Oh.
Yeah, he's listed as attendee.
So you could.
I didn't know that I couldn't, that he wasn't there. Sorry, Larry. Now it's easy.
All right, go back to attendees. See the dots beside you.
Hello, are you hearing me? Oh, there you go.
Hi. We're good. No, good thing I could promote it. Oh, there we go.
Hi, Larry. Have you heard what's going on so far?
Yeah, some of the audio is a little muffled, but I've heard most of it.
If we think if we put that in, it'd be better, but
Well, at this point.
Well, just introduce yourself, Larry, and we will proceed.
Sure. Yep, I'm Larry Goldman, council member and current tree board liaison.
Thank you all. Adoption of the agenda. I have just a few things to add to the standard agenda. One is that we'll have reports from Marty and myself on activities over the last month, the Arbor Day and Green Fair. That will be, I guess, under old business. Doug will give a report on his surveying some of the city properties that might be suitable for tree planting. And then I think we have a major order of business, which is the proposal by the city for amendments to the ordinance with respect to plantings right away.
Right, we've got that under C. Business.
Okay.
Works for me.
All right. Do we have anything else anyone would like to add to the agenda? Okay. And anything about outreach activities besides the Arbor Day?
I don't have anything. Sandy, you have anything?
I think that what I'd like to do is just highlight a few things on Marty's, and then I'll add to next month.
All right, I have a move to adopt the agenda with the items we just discussed. So Doug? Move, second, Marty? Okay, all in favor? Raise your hand. Okay, agenda is adopted. The minutes from the last meeting that were sent around by Riley along with the agenda. Anybody have any amendments or edits to the?
Question.
Okay.
Members present and absent. Under present, it says all were present at the meeting, and under absent, it says that Sandy and Julia were.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, yeah, Julia is no longer on the board, and Sandy was here, so I think that was probably something to come over previous. Good catch.
Yeah, good catch. Oh, I did that.
Anything else? Under meeting with city council, Chair Olmsted brought forth his experience presenting three boards work plan and is misspelled. Pretty minor.
I'll make it.
A motion to approve the meetings for the last meeting? Marty? Oh, you're moving. Doug's in a second. Second. Okay. All in favor? The minutes from the April meeting are approved. Okay, the next item on the agenda is citizen comments. This portion is set aside for the public to address the board on agenda items. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Do any of our public visitors have anything they'd like to see, John?
I have three things I just want to bring up to the board tonight. One, Douglas fir barkbeetles. I've had within the Stewardship Foundation, we had 3 separate citizens now report that they've had these. One is taken action. I think it's a pheromone trap. I can get more information. I can send it to Riley and just want to bring it to your attention that 3 different people are reporting this. And one has done treatment on the trees. It may be something that tree board would want to pay attention to. So Riley, I think you're the right person. I could send some info and get it to the board. Or okay. I have Riley's email address, so I'll send it to Riley. The second, there was a tree removal on 155th Street. I talked about this with Steve. So we the Stewardship Foundation and some citizens did an appeal last year. We lost the appeal, so these 2 trees were cleared to be cut, but with some provisos. The city arborist should be on site was one, and protection around the root zones. And the trees got cut a few weeks ago under a new permit. It almost seemed like maybe perhaps a loophole in that, the old permit, the hearing examiner put provisions in. On the new permit, which was issued this year, none of those provisions on the same property. And it's a done deal now. And more important, and I have talked to Steve, is to make sure when there's building, that we protect the trees that surround us. There's one very significant sequoia tree, 59-inch, 80-inch.
Sequoia.
Yeah.
Giant sequoia.
Giant sequoia.
Sequoia.
Yes. So anyway, I don't want to sandpaper people over that. I just want to bring it to attention. And then the third is the bus rapid transit project via Sound Transit. And I believe this is something where we all need to be kind of ahead of the curve. It's going to take out a lot of trees. I know Council Member Goldman, I know Steve Bennett's aware of it, but it's on the order of 500 trees that are going to be. And what's going to happen with that, I think we need to come together as a community. That's just my 2 cents. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Leslie, did you have anything you want to say?
No, I'm just observing and absorbing, because I must admit the past minute that discussion of, but no content. So I'm just here to try and get myself up to speed.
Are you interested in perhaps becoming a member?
I have turned in an application. I have not heard anything further.
Okay. Well, I don't, that, the process is out of our hands, I think, that's between.
It's such a mayor affairs. An interview would be the next steps. Be in touch.
Well, since I am not a tree professional, I am more a consumer. It may be something that I don't qualify to do, but I do have a long history of, I do have a yard that is both state and nationally certified as a native habitat. I grew up on 400,000 acres that my father managed in Oregon. So I do have some familiarity with trees.
Well, not all board members are professional on this support, so we welcome people bring other skills to the board. Thank you. Communication, we have any announcements or reports that we should hear at this time? Lee or
I don't know if this should be brought up now or later, perhaps.
Let's put that later. I think this announcements, communications here is more about things that might be happening in the city or that we should be aware of. Or
Not more than it's already on the agenda.
a big one that's on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. Old business. Let's have reports first about fairs or activities we've been involved with.
Oh, I should say before we get into that, the next meeting.
Oh, yeah. Next meeting, June 7th.
Yes.
So it's, I can count. I know that in my one exam classes.
Yeah, June 7th.
Actually started the day for free. Okay, June 7th, that'll also be both in person and by Zoom. As an aside, do we anticipate that that will be how all city meetings, board meetings will be held going forward? Anybody thought about that?
I think the current policy is to be hold as much as possible in person, we always have that option, especially if the public join on Zoom.
Good, that's good. Okay, well, I'll report on the Arbor Day, which was Saturday, the 15th, I think, of April. Our celebration of Arbor Day, which is about the ceremonial tree planting at Horizon View Park. We had a good turnout of all the tree board members, and the mayor and 3 city councilmen all attended, including Larry, and a handful of public who showed up, including a bunch of kids. So I've been meaning to write up a little report for the Forest Park E-News with pictures of kids and councilmen filling dirt into the hole. But I was up just one day last week to check out the tree, and it's leaking out. It's like it's doing fine. So I think it will flower in June. Hopefully, it's big enough and it should flower, and I think it'll be an attractive addition to the park. So, Green Fair, Marty? That is next.
We had a booth or a table at the Green Fair last weekend, last Saturday. And Sandy and I sat at the table in the morning, 10 to noon, and then Doug and Julie event sat in the afternoon. We had plenty of material to hand out. They wanted to pass this around, and then we've got more copies if you want. But this is the new flyer that Sandy designed that we had at the table, and this also fits in a business envelope, so we can include with letters. Here's that, and I'll pass these to you the other way. And then Doug says these are new too, so I'll pass.
They're new to me. Doesn't mean they're new.
Are these, has everybody seen these?
I don't think I have.
Okay. People seem to like those. I don't know if it's the blue or what.
Really informative, and we've talked
Yeah.
about,
The other thing that people really liked was that big poster that has 9 things to know about trees. And people kept asking where they could download it or where they could get a copy of it. So that's something we might think of for the future. We use the Arbor Day flag for kind of front of the table cover. And people thought we were the Arbor Day Foundation, so we need to do something different. Sandy and I sat at the table and looked across the table at the Climate Action Committee, and we thought, we want a banner like that. So we would like to discuss getting a banner made. We had pretty steady traffic, I would say, in the morning. A few gaps, but quite a few people stopped by. I'd like to hear how it was in the afternoon.
part of the active, he was quieting down. Mayor came by, he was there, I think he left. We got there. And a number of people came by with various questions about trees. And one thing we did, by the way, is we put that poster on the table for people. Getting short backs with me, I got a short back. And I shouldn't have too.
We'll have to work on that.
I'm sorry, the.
We should get an easel.
Yes.
That's about it. The fair was kind of, I would say, steadily busy. It wasn't overly crowded, but it wasn't big either. Sandy, do you want to add anything?
I just wanted to add one thing. So on the 1/3 page size handout that we did, that includes kind of an introduction to tree board, as well as a call on the back for tree board members. One of the things that we had discussed like last year was actually doing a second, 3rd page that included, and I'd like to look at and call for information that would include an introduction to tree permits, why they're awesome and we need to do them, as well as I'd like a little bit of a introduction to the arborist and how the arborist contributes to the overall wonderfulness of Lake Forest Park trees and the tree board and the tree permit process. So get any ideas that you have for that to me. I am thinking really high level, like a couple of bullet items. That's it. That's it. So anyway, that was it.
This thing here has a lot of information on it about that. It has something, but unfortunately comes off being the back about all the trees we have in Lake Forest Park and how wonderful they are. And the front is all about the permit process.
Yeah.
I want to sort of even that out so you aren't saying, you gotta get a permit. By the way, this is why trees are great. But this has got a lot of the right stuff in it. Maybe a little rearranging. If you have the.
I'm set. What I, yes. Yeah, I'm specifically thinking the same brand style that is that we did on that, the new one, so that when we put them into a mailer, we can do one, 6 months later, we do the other, 3 months later, we do the other, 6 months later, we do, and we kind of repeat back and forth so that there's something of a standard and a repeatable message that we can send out to the constituents.
Thanks to Hannah for getting those printed for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think they look really nice. Good. Okay, other item that I had in mind was, we had talked about spaces that the city owns, property city owns that might be suitable for tree planting, as part of the mitigation for the bus rapid transit. And Hannah found a link up around to those properties, and Doug, but I'm looking, and did you drive around? Or did you-
I don't look at it on the satellite. view, but Basically, what I learned is that this is just Lake Forest Park properties. There's King County properties in Lake Forest Park, and I didn't look at those because I felt that would be more of a challenge to do.
Before you, sorry, what was the name? There was a term.
Oh, somebody called it unheralded properties. Yes.
Yeah, that was, sort of what Tom Francis used. And I'm not sure if that had meaning or formal meaning, or if that was just a term he came up with off the top of that. You know that term, or have you heard that term before?
Was it unheralded?
Unheralded properties, which I thought maybe meant ones that were not developed in any way or something, but it may be just that he, came up with that term adjective for these properties. That doesn't really mean it, sure. But they are the properties that, are not developed in the city parks or one thing or another, here and there around the city, apparently, but by the city.
Yeah, there's probably about a dozen of them, and I visited quite a few of them. Mostly, I don't think they offer much possibility for us to plant there. A lot of them are very nicely forested already, before you go out or do anything. One of the ones that's not particularly nicely forested, the Stewardship Foundation is planting in. That's one near Grace Bowl Park. Across the street. Across the street, yeah, right. Guys, I saw all your flags and stuff in there. I see part of your, that one, but the others, they're either quite nicely forested or they're openly grassed, and many of the cases very actively being used. You can tell by the traffic, they're being used by kids. And I don't really see any reason to plant in the park that kids are using, plant trees in. So if we do things there, it would be kind of like what we did at Horizon View, maybe plant a tree here or there for, first on some margins, but not something that's going to take 20 or 30 trees. Just an occasional thing. One thing that did turn out is that city apparently owns a fair number of groundwater recharge areas, and they're mostly ponds about the size of this room, which are listed on that map that Hannah sent us. We might put some things around the edges of those. They're not places a lot of people see. So I mean, they're not great places, not as good as the park. But just to conclude, I had sort of envisioned vacant lots overgrown with blackberries and things like that. And there may be some of those in the city, but they don't belong to the city. Unless I think the map Hannah sent me was dated 2016. And there could be some new ones since then, but basically vacant lots that could need attention. Are just not very common.
Thank you, Doug. I guess that means that one of our thoughts about places for planting a bunch of trees is probably not going to pan out. The city wanted to plant those grassy areas, but those are impromptu public use areas. Is that how you describe them as?
Yeah, and they're not overgrown grass, they're old grass. Somebody's going. Yeah. I took a number of pictures of them, but if we want to look at them more closely, I can make pictures in some time and show where they are.
Steve, do you know anything about?
I know the city owns a lot of property like this. There's one back on the city shop.
So that was one I couldn't get into.
Yeah.
And that is when I have.
Probably pretty forested, but it's also.
Right, and nobody can get it. Yes, we can plant trees, we could plant some trees there around the wetlands, to sequester carbon and to do all the good things that trees do. But in terms of making life more enjoyable for people in the city,
Well, I think
maybe a dozen truck drivers.
a significant amount of the tree planting we're going to do is going to be for
the city area in the city shop may be a possibility. I just couldn't get it.
And so I think you help me to know that what did you start with as a list? Did you start with the Brooks plan, this list of city-owned properties that are first, or very appreciated the figure out where to go.
And I found out a month ago, they just had,
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, we can find out if any plans the city has, but we know that the only two parks that are at the planning stage is the one next to and Lakers. And then there's, of course, the lakefront. 5 acres have plans for that. But all these other little, this piece of property probably do not have a plan for. So I think it would be good to just kind of get a sense of where you visited, and so we can start developing. That is a key portion of this code update. So we need to create kind of an official list that these regulations we're going to talk about will refer to, or sort of like, second tier plan in the corridor, 2 plan in these first sites. We'd like to have a list like that council can refer to when they adopt these regulations.
I can send you that shows where they mostly are and things like that. But as I say, there's not really much sense in planting trees in the understory forest. It's already there.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what many of them are. And we get, there's more mostly grassy areas where I think people might resent having their playgrounds taken away from them. Their soccer fields taken away.
Yeah, there might be a
might be
way to
some-
do it with trees around the perimeter.
Yeah, there could be there and that. If we want to go that direction, there are certainly possibilities. But there don't seem many places I see that just look like they're just making you take care of there. And a fair number of them are steep slopes right next to Nectar Creek, things like that.
All right, thank you for doing that. Any other old business? I think that's all we had. There's no project, no report on any update on the neighborhood tree planting. That I think is sort of on hold until we find out more about what we have litigation. That I think also all of that should be. New business, or is this old business?
I was mistaken. I was looking at an old agenda that I printed out by mistake. Yeah, this really is kind of new business.
Yeah, I call it new business, and I don't think we have anything else by old business. Can I turn this over to you? Sure. Thank you for sending that around the other night.
Yeah,
Here, the word. Stapling is funny.
So what I propose to do is to share this draft on the Zoom screen so we can all kind of see what we're talking about. And then have some comments, Councilor Goldman, as well as Doug. And so I'm going to try to address those as we go through. If I miss something, just feel free to chime in if we're in a section where you got a question and my background doesn't cover it. So this is our first version of these regulations that is put into ordinance form by the city attorney. You're going to see some changes that I might not spend a lot of time on because they're more, she is going through and cleaning up some things. But if you see something that you're curious about, that I've gone over, please stop me. We can go back and take a look at it. So just as far as an overview, some of you probably very familiar with the tree regulations up there. But you kind of think of it in portions where we have a set of definitions. We have a set of application requirements, but you have to have a complete application for all the various types of treatments. And then we have a set of criteria for these are the tree permit application has to meet these certain criteria in order for the city arborist or staff to approve. So what we've done is just try to address two types of right-of-way permits that have kind of been never really, one of them never really spelled out, probably should have been a long time ago. That's just like, how are we going to treat trees in the right-of-way? When somebody says, you know, I'm really tired of this giant tree that's reminding my driveway. It's in the right-of-way, it's not on my private property. So we kind of have handled those and try to just, you know, use the same procedures as we would like a minor tree permit. Now we're proposing to address that with some specific criteria that really kind of puts the onus on the applicant to say, you know, yeah, it's you know, it's undermining some infrastructure, some improvements, or it's unsafe, or it's the couple of criteria we get to. So that's one set of changes. Definitions dealing with that, application requirements, and application approval criteria. The other big one, main thing we're trying to do with this one, the set of code changes, is create permit that can be like one permit application. You know, we have a utility type of permit application that covers a corridor. So now we're kind of springing off of that and creating a right-of-way corridor project that's really attuned towards transportation, like sound transit. What we want to do is kind of use that model of utility. That's it. For your application requirements, you need to develop a plan that shows you know, how much canopy is going to be taken out, how you're going to replace it. So therefore, we have to create sort of this set of criteria for, you know, this is our preference. We want you to replace it in the corridor. And then if you can't do it there, then you could, you know, do it at these preferred sites we just talked about. Can't do it there, and propose how you would do it. But the main goal is to get back to placing the canopy, just like every other type. You know, the minor, we want to replace canopy and make things, make sure they're the same. So that in mind, I thought we could just kind of take a quick look at the new definitions we created here. We've got all, we decided just to put all the definitions that are in the tree code in this, because we end up referring to them further we get into it, we realize, oh yeah, it's already a defined term. Let's just use that and not try to create new ones. So our first change is instead of having one definition for off-site replanting, we created one for each of the situations that addressing the situations we've already addressed in the code, and then creating this new off-site replanting program or the off-site fee in lieu, and the off-site, and just breaking these out. Really, this is not really a policy change. It's just making it clear that each one of these is a separate definition, so that there reduces confusion. And the off-site replanting fee in lieu could come into play if the applicant for this corridor project, you know, can't replace all of the criteria. So can't do all of the canopy replacement, you know, in kind. They want to pay for something. So one of the things that Hannah and I are sort of researching is, you know, what would that mean? What would it mean in terms of the current addition of the Council for Tree and Landscape Appraisers Guide and appraisal? Does that mean they're appraising, if they've got a tree that they have to take out, can't place somewhere else, that we're appraising that as if it was a fully mature tree, 450 square feet of canopy, or is it, you know, the replacement cost of something that would be equivalent to planting a tree somewhere else and then getting that canopy in 30 years? Sure. So,
one comment there, but some of our fully mature trees are 3 times there's a balance there, 450 is it's probably a generous compromise for the size, but it is somewhat.
Right, so, in that case, it would be good to all of these, remember we have a number, it's starting, this is actually one number that was in the code. And we were thinking about trying to get a little bit more background as to what led to that in this process. And it was, I try to get that data net. That's where I came from. But I think the general approach to it, feel free to chime in, Hannah, if you add anything, is that we have a process that's already in here. We really want to discourage this ever being used. So we want to get that replaced. Right? We want to get the trees placed. And we want to make it clear to the applicant that that's our goal, is just to have canopy replacement. So it's in there, and we need to find a little bit, but so we may be coming back to that with additional language.
Before you go too much further than there, I had two things before this section. There's a stray comma there in line 21 after means.
Oh, yeah, you might have to argue grammar. Oh, you're right, that is a straight up. Duly noted.
Previous two means don't have that. And a couple pages earlier, there's a definition of caliper.
Right.
Been in the code apparently forever, but it no longer has any defines anything that's in the code. We no longer say anything. Code no longer says no maintenance. That's it. So we might change it in the future, put it back in, but they did not.
We can just do a worse or just
I think I did that one.
you didn't find it.
I did find it, yeah.
Good. Like,
But it doesn't go through the-
discuss that offline, to see the value of that.
Well, my part, and it says for the person calculates each 450 square feet of canopy coverage be replaced off-site should be considered one tree. So if a tree is removed someplace that has 900 square feet of canopy coverage, the tree being removed, that would require 2 trees to be planted at a site location.
Right, or you wanted to pay the price, whatever we determine that to be. Now, so this is like, you get into this discussion only if they can't find a place to replace all the canopy. So if there's 20,000 square feet of canopy to be replaced, we're not calculating what kind of tree that is. We're saying, go out and develop your plan. It could be 100 street trees, or it could be 50 firs, or whatever. And so what I think, some of the ambiguity you might find uncomfortable is kind of to give the applicant the opportunity to come up with a plan. So we're not just cutting off a possibility that may, once we have a plan, may be seen as a good way to go.
Comment on that. If we, in the council of tree and landscape appraisers, things like that, I would be willing to guess they will say the value of a tree is, I think I saw somewhere $4,000 planted to replace a tree. They're not going to say the value of 40 square feet of canopy is something. So making some kind of, but when they're taking trees out, they're taking out an area, they're taking out a tree, they're also taking out an area. So I guess I'm sort of saying that's probably, it's important to have a conversion between canopy area and tree numbers. And
Yeah.
that's pretty good.
Okay, yeah, and we do need to spend a little more time thinking about that to make sure we can explain it to the applicant as well, and to council, so I appreciate your thoughts about it. So, but,
I think replacing canopy area with canopy area, good, but if it comes to converting it to money, then
Yeah.
converting it to trees is probably good. But probably I would say, canopy area to canopy area, potential canopy area. They can't put in the canopy area that's going to come out. I don't think so. You may want to. I think the code says it has to be replaced in 30 years.
30 years.
That seems a little long to me.
right, but that's, we don't want to all of a sudden change our policy for a new kind of app. And that's, it looked really punitive.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of.
I didn't want that when I put treated my event there. So I didn't want it to go for 50 cars for feet and make the tree up there. So yes.
30 years isn't very long.
So great, I appreciate those comments.
For those of us who may have overplanted an area and have overlapping canopy, how do you justify replacement of something that's in the process of dying and ill because it's been overgrown? Does that fit into the picture?
You know, that's kind of what the tree regulations are designed to deal with. If you have a dead tree that's dying, you know, it may not be that you have to add or replace the same amount of canopy. It's kind of a longer discussion than we really have time for.
Right, but as you're saying, to replace, I'm just hoping that that stays in mind, that you're looking for a healthy canopy.
The short range is also, as Steve said, if it's dead, you don't have to replace it.
Right.
If it's really going downhill and you want to take it out before it falls on your house, well, then you might be able to get it declared as a hazard tree. I think you're sort of going to bind if it's just sick.
Okay.
My experience with the tree permit process, one time I required one, is that I had planted a number of specimen trees that I was really valued. They were close together and became overgrown by an alder that I had just mowed around and let grow. And that alder grew so much faster than the other more valuable trees that I needed to prevent. And that was a case of crowding where removing one tree helped provide space for the others.
And as long as it's only one tree, I'll let you set the place.
Yeah, although it's the minor tree permits, I think there's a lot of flexibility with respect to the first. And if your lot already has canopy over the minimum.
All right, I just didn't hear that as a component of this discussion.
That's in the other, sort of the regular tree board or tree ordinance, I think, not in this amended.
Okay,
So we're talking.
thank you.
So first set of new definitions on page 6. And these, and both Doug and Larry commented on this first one related to how we define the right-of-way quarter. So we just kind of staff level picked a number based on, well, you know, if it's 1,000 feet on either side, that provides more opportunities potentially for the applicant to find opportunities to replace plant street trees or developing agreement with private property owner. There's just more possibilities now. So that, you know, Doug has noted that seems pretty wide. And the one of the nuances here is that because it is so wide, you're quickly getting out into the lake, 1,000 feet on one side. And so that's what the second sentence is about. It's just like, well, if some portion of that corridor is over the lake, then consider it to be moved whatever distance in the lake. It moves over, so you have 2,000 feet of option right now. So we may, you know, tinker with that to be more understandable, not over, you know, standing water. So but that's the intent. And so, you know, I think that would be great, you know, think the tree board to comment. Do you think that's, you know, Doug's point was that, well, this is, seems like you're really dispersing this place canopy, essentially almost a half mile width. You know, so should we be you know, trying to get it more concentrated so it's more clearly kind of mitigating for what was taken out in close into the corridor? That would be very helpful to kind of for the council for you to weigh in on that. And since I'm saying that, I think, you know, we're going to be kind of talking about this and trying to, you know, move this along. So I think a good way for the tree board to respond to this, certainly once to comments that you ever think of now, but I'm sure you'll, as you get to understand it better, you'll have more comments. So I'm want to encourage you to be thinking either as individuals or as a board and say, as we get to meetings before the council, like, that you either send the council written comments or you maybe we arrange time for you to talk to council in real time. And we're not going to really have time to go through the kind of thing we do with the planning commission, where it's the planning commission makes a recommendation to the council. So it would be great if we could just kind of, as the opportunities arise, as you coalesce to set of comments, just provide that directly to council, the CCD, so I have it.
Seems to me, what comment about that is that one of the things we're hoping to mitigate here, not only canopy placement, but also the sound dampening effect that canopy trees have. And that, I think, having a wide corridor makes sense. That sound dampening will be, have an effect even up to a quarter mile away from the highway.
Yeah, sitting in my neighborhood, looking up the hill 1,000 feet, which is 4 blocks. Like, I'm not really convinced that the tree up there is going to help much. And I would rather, frankly, see them put more trees in places that currently don't have trees, in areas that have plenty of trees but happen to be within 1,000 feet of the corridor. So if we're really trying to make, and I'm all in favor of picking the people who block property anyway, things like that, giving them plenty of opportunity to have new trees planted in their yards, and close enough to be kind of sound dampening, but 1,000 feet is a long way. It's here to the lake, shore, and then some. Oh, you're probably twice here. I would think I would make the corridor narrower and encourage them to do more off-site planning, more out-of corridor planning. I'm over where the village plant trees in the corridor more densely.
It will survive, will be healthy.
Will be healthy, right? Yeah, that's what we meant.
Well, that's one of those areas where we're counting on the experts, between applicants, arborists, and city arborists, to, where you'll see some preferences to viable trees. We're not going to say that you plant giant sequoia where you don't have room to reach maturity. But that can't be part of the plan. So yeah. But as we get through these, maybe it'll come clearer. Try to address that type of issue.
I guess what I'm thinking though is that if I were doing something, if I were South Bend, and I've been working in a corridor right in an area right next to the tree, I'm going to want to plant the trees there in place I've been working with. Got rid of all the dirt anyway, or digging up the dirt, things like that. It's going to, my truck's going to be right there. So I think that will be a primary for the plan, to the extent that they are getting, trying to plan on top of buildings, obviously. Just like our driveways, but I would think that's where they would want it.
Well, I think that would be good,
Yes.
but I'm not sure that what we want is for them to jam everything into
No,
that.
I agree, right now. So then that's where I think Steve is saying their ethics and their laws.
Yeah, there's just best practices.
Yeah.
So this seems like the approach the shoreline is taking, right? The shoreline right away, they have a pretty wide right away around the light rail. It goes well back into the neighborhoods. We've looked at their maps that show that.
Well, yeah, I know they have a program where they're inviting.
Yeah, that's right. That's sort of a neighborhood.
So it does have kind of a quarter.
They're using money or trees that they're getting through mitigation purposes.
Yeah.
And they're providing landowners, property owners within a certain distance of that quarter to less trees. I think something like that would be worth emulating here. But I think the biggest way to succeed in expanding tree canopy in Lake Forest Park is going to be by getting private land.
That may be an outcome, but we don't include that. But we would actually prefer that that had already been thought out, not just like, whatever. Set aside as money to buy trees for people to actually come in. We have replaced canopy, we've done that. Yeah. Maybe down the road. So that, I do think that was, I think, what I guess the shoreline didn't have to do was think through how does this fit into our overall tree regulations. So they came with a creative plan. But we're hoping to have a little more short, 3 years for way to getting this. And we have a plan that says, well, this is private tree plan.
Do you think it's realistic to ask South Transit to do kind of an outreach to the city, basically, and see if we have some trees we'd like to plant, how much, how would your yard do?
Well, yeah, I don't know that, maybe an option in this, but I don't know that shoreline is now in control of that program, so I think it would become the city's program.
Yeah.
Ideally, they've already worked that out. They've worked out some sort of agreement with these property owners in addition to whatever they worked out with the city. I would think most of their proposal for replanting and canopy placement is going to be in the park. They're going to try and find areas on the south of the city where the street tree program would make sense. And make that part of the plan, if we get a chance to do it. So, but it may be that they are constantly working with property owners on various types of agreements for cheaper construction. So I have these, but we're going to plant this tree and in probably 3 years, you're going to think it. That's the whole point of this process.
It'd be nice if they would, it would save the city.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's the way it works with like King County, the trail enhancement a decade or so ago. They had a monitoring. Those wetlands. Some of them did better than others, but we extended the monitoring program. So we were doing well. So for those, once you have that set up, it provides a dialogue with the city and talk about this annual report and say how things are doing.
I think one thing to consider is that you're talking about basically mitigation of the light rail, the shoreline is.
Yeah,
Yes, right. And the light rail is a lot more impact, a lot larger distance than a widening of the mountain drive. It's not actually going to increase, despite what some of my neighbors seem to think, it's not actually going to increase the amount of traffic on Mountain Way.
right. Just going to give the bus system opportunity to work.
Right, yes, right. So, I mean, it's going to be wider and that has an impact, but it's not suddenly going to be a huge corridor going through the park any more than it already is.
No, and I don't think there's been many opportunities right in the right of way, the blind right of way to actually do much. It's going to be, we're trying to get vegetated walls if we can, and at least the sidewalk on one side of the continuous from 140 to 150.
But I'm thinking they land on the next sidewalk.
Yeah, it's going to be really tight. This would be really good places for trees, but in some places there will be a. The pressure of trying to affect as little property as possible is pushing back against the idea of broad type of thing. That's kind of where we started, but saying, look, just do this in the space you can. So that's what I'm trying to balance.
And then every planting strip is 4 feet out of somebody's, or 5, 6 feet out of somebody's front yard.
So anyway, I'd like to move on just to kind of what's going on in the permit application requirements. That's really the next big thing. City attorney made a few minor changes to other types of permits. Clarify language. See if you can do this, for page 9, this, the way this is set up, you kind of have to introduce these. Just try to stick with that format. Having the right of way treatment. This section. And B, having this. So C, which starts page 9, middle of page 9. Goes on to 10 and 11. 11 is where you've got the first new substantial criteria related to these two types of treatment. So this is where we're creating, the first sort of policy guidance related to right-of-way treatment. This section is designed to address the situation where a property owner wants to deal with a tree in front of their property, not the corridor, just like any right-of-way tree. And of course, most of the right-of-way trees in the most part are volunteer. They just let grow in the right-of-way. And so what we're saying is that, first of all, you got to confirm where that tree is. So, we're taking the approach that, this tree is growing in the right of way, so it's really a city tree. So you're going to have to prove, first of all, is it in the right of way? So that we're not going through this process if it's not. Or if it is clear it's in the right of way, and it's not clear. B is like, is it really in front of your property, or is it in front of the other person's property next door to you? Oh, you're going to have to all agree that it needs to be removed. So we want an authorization for everybody that side of the street. 3, we want to replace the boss canopy. So they're going to have an arborist do a canopy coverage study of the tree. And that, and then we're establishing the replacement criteria. Provides at least one tree replacing each tree removed to provide canopy coverage equal or greater to that tree. So that's basically the minor tree. It's 1 for 1, as long as you're not placing Doug fir and cherry tree. So what we're saying is to have a complete application, these are the things you need to provide.
Get your comments on that section. That's the last thing I didn't comments on. Pretty often, we've been thinking about the trees in front of my house. Everybody runs about. There's probably a standard distance of 10, 15 feet.
It varies. We have right of ways that are 40 feet wide, pages less than 60 feet wide.
In many cases, it's pretty obvious. I mean, I've got 3 cherry trees in front of my house. Obviously, there's right of way. So why should I pay a city surveyor to come out and say yes? Well, why should that be even required? I would say these require an arborist. All these permits require an arborist. That's why. That the arborist decided to spend money on the survey. That's a couple of $100 there.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was when we started this process. We don't want to put the arborist in the middle of kind of a swaddle where that tree is. So it may be, I think it would be great to hear from the tree board about that in terms of, do you want to create, give the arborist the authority to fund the survey? Because they are, arborists can decide if there's any question, or the arborist could, I think like A or B, where you get the authorizations from all of those property owners to remove that tree. I declare that, I don't think it's my tree, and if it is my tree, it's okay to take it out.
Okay, so if I'm wondering if the tree in front of my house is in the right of way or not, I can say, hey, this is the right of way, and I do it, it's not. It's in my yard, I do it anyway. So yes,
It's very.
yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense to make those alternatives. The other comment I have is I think if you're planting trees right next to the street, the arborists ought to have to say what speed.
It's right on city property right away.
Right, so that's, if you're gonna replant. One of those things where we'd be covering that in the approval criteria.
I didn't think so. I didn't see that,
Okay,
but I could be wrong. But
Does it need the arborist or are there within right of way list of trees to be put together so that it's not an additional?
Probably are, but I mean, if you just say, hey, I want to replace it with a standard cherry tree. Say, sure.
yeah, I think we talked
Considering
about.
that you've got a curve that's being lifted by a Douglas fir, that's obviously not an acceptable option. But there must be a more direct way than having to go out and hire the arborist to come in.
Well, the arborist doesn't have to come to the property, the arborist has to look at the application. Yep.
We do have this street trees though. Those.
We have a tree list.
There's a tree list, but I haven't seen
Yeah,
a street tree.
Maybe the International Society. Anna, does the International Society of Arborists have a list of good street trees or bad street trees? Anna?
No, the city, yes, the city doesn't have a street tree list right now. That was one of the things that we're trying to update on the general tree list to mark if a tree should be planted in the street or not.
Yeah, I think some situation where the tree is a good one, it's not a Douglas fir, it's not a tree of heaven, it's not. I tried to find a list of trees that are considered invasive. It's not a very long list in county. But there's also trees that are just messy. I can't remember, but there are pecos, for example, are notoriously messy. People really like that.
Ravidian.
Well, that-
Shoots and.
Yeah, that's actually on the list of disapproved trees. But I know there's a fair number of trees that just have lots of mushy fruits. Just have on our backyard.
It
And-
seems like a contribution that would be consumer friendly.
But I mean, it wouldn't be that difficult to say to add to this, shall include the species of tree that supposed to be planted.
Right.
Okay. Steve, am I right that rights of way are measured from the center of the roadway rather than edge of the pavement or something?
Actually, the most, if you're not getting a survey, liable, is what you find. So where your, the meter, I guess, utility, gas or water, street, that meter is usually at the edge of the road. Oh, they never have to move it again. Yeah. Ideally, because, so your private property is very close to where that meter is. Same thing with the telephone poles, those are usually very close to the edge of the line. Center of the street should be, really vary, whether it's at the center of the line.
Sidewalks should be right away.
Sidewalks are in the right of way.
Or utilities outside the sidewalks. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, have a sidewalk.
Is it?
It's not that common. So, but yeah, we usually just trying to help somebody figure that out. I rely more on the.
The county IMAP or GMAP, whatever they call it, has lines that they say they're not to be used for legal cases. Probably pretty not bad there either.
That's why the city attorney was really big on, let's say you gotta get that location survey, because the case law and, decide, and trying to talk about, whose portion of the tree is the biggest portion of the tree, so it's your trees, it's really it's not a good place to go. So, But yeah, so we more to come on that. Those are some good comments. Both of those things. So, but maybe the easiest thing to do is stay on these types. Let's not switch gears and go to the right project. Let's just stay, let's just move to 070 and look at what are the requirements for approval for right of way, and this kind of single property. We'll come back to 040. So now we're going to page 14, bottom of 14 is the right of way treatment as the criteria for granting. So, you know, the more I think about this, it may lead to us to look at this more closely. We may want to have what's saying here, more reflected in the application requirements, just as your comments before. So what we're saying is that the arborist needs to find that the trees are causing some sort of physical damage to structures, utilities, building foundations, etc., that it can't be dealt with by pruning. And the trees in a so these are set of, it's got to be one or the other of these things. The tree is in such poor condition that poor vigor that removal is justified. Trees an invasive species as verified by the city office. Or this tree cannot be successfully attained through unavoidable conflict with public or private construction. So that the distinction between that and one is that this is new construction. So they got to build a driveway to get to their house. And so they looked at all the options and this is the least impact. So we're establishing something that's really akin to what we have in the critical areas, tree regulations, setting a pretty high bar. You can't, it's not just because you want to take it out. It's that you have to meet one of these criteria. So that's kind of a policy change from where we are now. We treat it like land. But you know, I think as we point, these are so the city streets should be protected. Any thoughts about that?
But one thought I have is, what about the Congress? What rights does the city have to go in and plant trees on rights of way that are in front of people's homes?
Well, I think, you know, in the public right of way, they only do not know that, but we do have the right to make improvements, whether that's putting in a sidewalk or street tree. And so you just want to give them a heads up, education during that process, but the city has every right to manage the right of way.
One of the places that a former board member was advocating for was Highway or 35th Street, north of Ballinger. Long straight stretch of street that is pretty barren of trees on both sides for much of the way.
So north of 104, both 104, yeah, daycare, yeah, and
if trees were just planted in the right of way, we could add a lot of trees.
right. So that would be if that's a target area that you want to recommend in this list. Those kind of things as you board members, you've been thinking about these longer than South Transit has. And so we could give, regardless of the width of the corridor, we could say, if you do here, we'll count it as in, because this is a priority area.
And then the city continues to maintain and cover the water expenses for keeping those things growing and all of that. Unlike the current regulations that say if it's in front of your house, you're responsible for it financially.
Well, it depends on Sound Transit. answer them. There was.
Well, I'm talking about an example of 35th.
Well, I think that whoever is responsible for planning it would have responsibility for maintaining it for a certain number of years to make sure it establishes that it would revert to home responsibility.
I think your point is very well taken. Those of us who have trees in the right of way in front of our house are responsible for paying, for pruning and things like that. But they aren't our trees.
Right.
It's currently a fact of life. I'm not saying I want to change it, but it costs me money to keep my cherry trees moving properly.
But it's something that needs to be built in and considered as you're considering options of planting trees.
Okay, any other thoughts on that, or should we go back and just kind of go through these two sections? You can always come back to me in these sections I talked about.
I think your suggestion is might be able to fold this section into the previous section. Might
Yeah,
not be bad, might not be bad.
Well, it's, we're trying to work within the structure of the, current tree regulations doing this, so. But, I think, but what the essence, sort of the, there's what the code spirit, whatever is called for, in the, we can reflect some of the language. If there's an opportunity to strengthen the application requirements, make it clearer, that would be a great comment. We'll probably have to stick with having a set of application, the requirements for the application, and then the requirements for approval.
You can require, here we talk about the application showing food, A could be justification, following or
Yeah.
justifications.
Yeah, that's kind of, I was hearing. I was thinking just look at that.
Maybe the approval section. Shorter.
Okay, so then looking at the application requirements for the right way corridor project. So what we're trying to, and what we're expecting from the applicant here is just really kind of a pretty well put together document that covers all of these things. It's kind of like table of contents, an explanation of the goals and purposes of the project. And then the timeline related to the removal as well as the replacement, description of monitoring and maintenance. And then canopy study showing how much, what's the total canopy that's going to be lost. And then more detail for maintenance and monitoring for the risk trees that are kind of within the limits of disturbance. At risk is already defined in code, so that's what we're using that. The right of way placement plan is really the meat of this, but we're identifying all the trees that are removed and those being retained. They're considered either at risk or within the limits of disturbance. Then maintenance plan, 3 years of maintenance and monitoring, replanted trees, and demonstrating, and then this criteria of showing how this is sort of this giving guidance. It has changed since the last time. This is something that Council Gold was talking about. We had a fairly extensive conversation about how the previous version of this was going to work. And what I think, because it was sort of complicated, and just after discussing the council's input, the city attorney and I decided we should just go for something more straightforward in terms of this setting up the criteria where they demonstrate reasonable efforts to replace lost canopy by using this prioritization. This prioritization of replanting locations is sort of based on what we have in the critical areas. That's a prioritization mitigation. So just kind of following that, so we're defining, this is where we get into, you can't just pack a bunch of Doug fir saplings together. Is it a feasible in accordance with the definition? According to the definition of viable, feasible is something where the applicant either obtain private property permission or just right away the city's permission to replant in the location conditions conducive to grow a viable tree. So that's going to depend on the ability to say, it's not viable, bunching all those trees together just because you found this one day problem. So we feel like that gives us a pretty good hammer to get something that really makes sense. And then replanting, second choice, replanting where feasible. I'm grabbing that concept again, and preferred offsite location areas identified in the right-of-way corridor at offsite planning guide. That's where we're looking at the tree board to give us some of these things, just like we talked about 35th. Using the right of way there as a offsite preferred offsite replanting location. And then if you still can't find enough locations for replanting in those two areas, then replanting where feasible in other locations in the city limits. So maybe they identify another street. It wasn't in your list, but it actually makes sense. So they're getting a one-for-one. That's for all of these situations. If you you can just subtract from your 20,000 square feet of lost canopy, you can subtract exactly what you're able to replant for pretty good maturity.
Is that in there? Is that part of the 30-year maturity in there somewhere? I just realized I don't recall seeing it.
It's I think I have to go back and to look at it again, tell you how to get there, but essentially we're saying, that replacement tree has to reach that canopy. That gets you the definition.
Okay.
And so then, worst case scenario, we demonstrated some portion of the canopy replacement is not feasible, but by implementing priorities 1, 2, and 3, then the applicant shall pay a fee in lieu of offsite replacement for the main canopy. And so then you're just by stating it in that way, we're reaching back to that definition that we're talking about initially. And so, we do need to be able to talk very affirmatively about what that means. Are we going to apply that 450 square feet? And how does that work? So we have some homework to do there. And so then the other thing we want to get is a map that makes this whole thing easily understandable regarding what the trees that are effective, the trees that will be taken out, the trees that were made, and so we can that needs to depict the significant trees, including the CRZ, critical root zone, and the ICRZ, interior critical. So within the limits of disturbance, maps shall also clearly indicate where the trees are proposed, whether the trees are proposed for removal or retention. So we've been in a multicolored map there that should indicate what's coming out, and it's something that would be clear for anybody to look at and understand the implications of the project. And finally, this is just kind of a standard plan for trenching, reconstruction, for the critical root zone and CRC, part of the tree protection plan. So we're giving the arborist similar discretion to allow some things to happen inside the ICRC. And so someone brought up, I think that was you, Councilman Goldman. How do we address this possibility of something that's done on the shoreline where they was a good reminder. City Arborist Swanson and I will, put our heads together, see if this is where I think we would do that in this particular type of, we give ourselves a little bit more discretion to say, that's something that could happen, in this plan. You could retain trees if you had a plan that, the city arborist could help was viable. So, and I'll show you, I don't know if we've had a chance to talk about this, but show you pictures of what they did shoreline with this boardwalk that actually goes right over the trees. And, you know, I don't know if it's still, it's something that, you know, we don't want to exclude it. I don't know if it's still a possibility with the Sound Transit project, but it would be good if we could allow that for future projects, not this current. So those are the number 7 there is just moving something to a different location. I don't think there's really much of a language change there, other than making it clear that it's part of the we talked about criteria. So that's kind of the overview. The additional thoughts based on how we got that.
I think that 3-year number. I'm trying to.
I found it under protected trees, but only trees.
Oh, okay.
Size.
That's really not much place for it.
Well, the key there is in line 32. A protected tree is a tree that is associated with an approved tree protection or replacement. So every time you get your tree permit, that replacement plan is part of it. And so you're kind of deciding on to protect the viability of that tree, which achieves the 30-year maturity. So that's, from that we spring off to the tree list, giving people a canopy that if you're going to plant this kind of tree, the tree list says that's going to reach this amount of canopy. So the arborist can say, yeah, okay, you can achieve replacement canopy with that tree.
I don't think it actually says that in the code though. It just says if you have a tree that's protecting, you have to protect it until 30 years old. But I don't think, unless you, I think you did the same thing I did, you looked at the number 30. Yeah, I kept finding line 30. I don't think it says anywhere that we're talking about
Page 5 of this document.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's how we get there. I need to ask the city attorney if she thinks that gives us the ability to require that somebody have a tree reach maturity. I guess is that your question?
Well, no, not really. This says you have to make it reach maturity. It doesn't say anywhere that I can see that the definition of replacing the canopy is replacing the canopy with a tree that will reach that size in 30 years. So I can say, I don't see anything to code, and I don't practice.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to.
But I don't think I think
It's pretty fundamental to our tree.
I don't think it's in the code.
I think we've got it somewhere, but I can't tell you where it's right now.
It should be. I mean, it's sufficiently fundamental. No, I agree. I think it's the way it should be. Everything else, I can't actually find it here as part of the code. If you take out 125 square feet of canopy, you have to replace it with 125 feet of canopy in 30 years. It's practical. But I think it's in the code, so maybe one of these definitions needs to be placement tree or something like that needs to be.
Yeah. If I can't convince you, it's in the,
I'm not convinced it's in here.
no, it's definitely not just, you can't get there with just definition. But I think this is sort of the foundation, of how we get there through, you're required to replace canopy. You have to use tree list, et cetera. So, I'll let you, I'll get back to you. All right, any other thoughts? Share my screen so you can see everybody.
Can you say more about the process, Steve? Where this is going? All the tree board in the future,
Yeah, so we had the initial council review, just a portion of these provisions, sort of a set of policy questions. How do you want to handle this? How do you handle that? Was discussed at the April 13th meeting. And then there was discussion about what we'd like to know what the tree board thinks about this. And so that's where we're at now. We taken a few more steps based on that input and brought tree board version that we were thinking taking to the council. The next opportunity should be, I think, May 22nd, this should be a whole meeting. So if the tree board can, in the process of council review, provide comments about what your understanding of this snapshot of regulations, that's I think the council would really appreciate that. So the beyond that meeting on the May committee of the whole meeting, it's not certainty this much. So I suggested that would be a place having that discussion on this. I think we have a chance to to digest tree board comments and maybe factor those into this draft in formal comments. But then the council, if the council would like to get this to the point where they're ready to adopt it, I would think, by early midsummer. Because this is a land use regulations. So those processes can be up to 60-day process. Once the council is pretty firm where it is with regulations, it's not going to change up to a public hearing.
so I guess the tree board wanted to discuss this further in the June meeting. It'd be
There'll still be time.
worthwhile to have a conversation. Rather than stopping to the game. So in terms of
Right there, it talks about improved planning areas, the next level of desirability after the corridor. Would it be useful if we could just sort of draw some circles in the map and say this is, for example, city streets, and this is a desirable, whatever that was called, desirable planning area or preferred planning area. So that's kind of what we talked about here. We said, this sort of blob down the southwest city in this area.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be parcels. I think it could be, so just like, and so we can see what the council's idea is of that, and that's a wonderful starting place. To say, here are some areas that have experienced really under tree. So,
We have been talking about a sort of neighborhood tree planting. Where we would identify part of the city that is under less canopy grass and created outreach to citizens and homeowners in that neighborhood and give them the opportunity to request a tree. And area that we had identified as perhaps a starting point is at northwestern corner of the city. Lots of small lots. Relatively few trees, many of them. And I think it's a sort of a lower socioeconomic neighborhood where just the cost of putting in trees would be a predictive expense. Not that they don't want trees, it's just that they may not have ever felt that they could, that was a priority. Whereas if we could provide an opportunity for them to request a tree that would cost, all they would have to do is make it. 3 years later. Yeah. that it would be a great way to increase canopy and also increase property values and whatever else.
Joe, am I right in thinking if we identified those areas, I'm not saying we should do this, but the city could just go ahead and plant in the right of ways in those areas?
I think you could, yeah.
The problem with that, that area in particular, is all the right of ways have these trenches, it's off the street. So the obvious places to plant trees are not in the right of way, but rather in private landlords. Councilmember Bowman, please. Sir?
Yeah, so first I just wanted to answer a previous question. I think if you go to page 11 of the or draft ordinance and look at 5D, I think that seems to me where it hits the, if you remove 5,000 square feet of canopy, you have to put up 5,000 square feet of canopy.
But it doesn't say 30 years, just as canopy coverage equal to.
So I think that, Doug, that's in the whole tree code. This that we have here is just.
Yeah, but it's excerpts. Doesn't have everything.
So under the main tree code in, under major tree permits, it says tree removal permits, blah, blah, blah. If all portions of tree conservation easement are not tree level. The full, will achieve full canopy coverage on newly planted trees through 30 years of age. Excluded borrowed canopy from offsite trees.
But that's, I think that's one of the sections they're rewriting. See what, there's a see what's.
16.4.9. I notes.
So we're not putting the entire thing up in here.
No. Okay, but yes, that would be a great, be wonderful if we would make that a priority. Let's just get something under discussion that represents this preferred target areas. Any other thoughts about this?
One other question, I guess. There's a big strip of King County right away. It sort of goes down, basically starts at the reservoir and goes up diagonally. I don't know if that's a place, King County, it shows on the map as King County property. But I don't know if that's a place we consider.
That's the pipeline right away.
I think it's probably the
out of the pipeline.
most likely to be a straight line.
They probably, I mean, that's where it just our property, the one that goes west. And they come through and they clear that. Yeah. Because I think they don't. Trees from it.
So it's not.
Yeah, that's definitely the case.
Yeah.
Security issues. But,
So it's not a
yeah.
liable thing.
No, I think any public property is probably easier than working with private things. But I don't know if you want to make that perfect, because you have to get another entity involved in trying to get, so it could be like another.
I think you're probably right, Joseph. Because from what I can see from your photos, it's pretty clear. It's a long stretch to back clear by truck, just like horses.
Sandy, did you have something you wanted to add?
More just ask or clarify. So one of the, it's kind of hard to read through, but so there's municipal, there's county, there's utility, state, whatever. There's a variety of different right of way for ownership. Does this address all of those or just the municipal?
Well, the rights of way where our streets are, those are all city rights of way. Now, there are other easements and things out there that, like we were just discussing, where the King County actually owns parcels of property that make up the Burke Gilman Trail. They're not a right, they're actually long pieces of property that have a parcel number. So each one of, so when you get into there are properties that are owned by other government entities, but the right of way specifically that where you find your streets is city controlled for the most part, except for the state highways, where it's kind of joint.
Yeah, so then for follow-up, when we're looking at areas of where to put the trees, are we restricted to only the municipal right away?
No, we could, we're trying to keep this broad enough so that it could be private property or some of those government owned properties, just like, you need to have their permission, or so just one more hoop.
So that's a good point, actually. Lake Forest, Ballinger Way or Buffalo Way is a state highway. Does that affect all this right of way discussion for your right of ways? It's not ours.
Well, it is, it's like I just trying to explain it, the Washington Department of Transportation would like for us to do everything. We would, but we push back and say, no, that's your retaining wall, you gotta maintain it. So it's kind of a dance back. But, it's essentially city right of way that, or state facilities, just like it will be town transit. Facilities. But we issue the right of way permit, actually starts.
I had a conversation with somebody once pointed out that the manhole here across the street is a state manhole, not a city manhole.
Yeah, it's like, people own things in the right of way. You gotta get a right of way. Well, I appreciate all of your input.
20 minutes left. Well, I think that was the last major item on the agenda. So, Larry, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so two questions for the tree board to think about. The first is just big picture. So I think the sense I got is that you want to come back to this at your June 7th meeting and then vote on some suggestions. Is there anything you'd like me to present to the rest of the council in the interim? And second question is, how specific will this tree map be? Like when you're coming up with preferred offsite locations, will it be sort of like Sheridan Heights needs more trees? Or will it be 35th Avenue outside Mary Jones's house? Like, how specific are you going to be looking to get? But I guess two things to think about.
Yeah, and I was thinking in terms of identifying a neighborhood with explicit street boundaries as a starting point for a neighborhood tree planting.
But a number of blocks wide.
Yes, so right, it could be 6 blocks by 10 blocks or something like that. Exactly what the area would be. But it encompasses quite a number of landowners, so that there would be an opportunity for people who wanted trees to get plant trees, and people who would not have the space. We would be able to find a bunch of trees.
But that especially 35th Avenue I'm not familiar with it, but it's a heavily used thoroughfare.
It's a pretty heavily used thoroughfare.
So it wouldn't be a disaster if we said these neighborhoods plus this street.
Yeah, I think we could have this neighborhood, this street, this whatever.
Yes.
Outside of that stretch, it's pretty well street. There's this side of the street going up to the daycare.
Yeah.
There's lots of trees.
The first couple blocks there is, then you get to a pretty long stretch of 2 or 3 blocks, probably. Like, it's pretty open.
After the intersection.
South of there.
Oh, there's a set way back.
Most of the houses are set way back. On the
Yeah.
west side, there's an apple orchard
Yeah.
that's set off the street a ways, that hasn't been maintained in years. So
That's what you're.
yeah, along that street.
I got one more question then. So layman's terms, are we considering something like almost like an avenue of trees?
Yes, for that 35th, that's more or less
Yeah.
what we could
So
conceive of.
there are targeted areas where we would be considering proposing to the neighborhood something along the lines of an avenue of trees, like your house, your house, your house every couple feet, or however that works for like
Yeah, they would be.
large
trees.
population.
Then the other plan would be one where landowners could request trees. They can plant them anywhere on their property they wanted to. With the understanding that each tree would help enhance the canopy in that neighborhood.
Okay.
We could provide a list of trees that we would make available, so it wouldn't be that they would necessarily get to choose any tree they want. It would be a restricted list. We could choose, they could choose.
Yeah, and then I seem to recall in like months previous, we had discussed, so if I was a homeowner, or I am a homeowner, or whatever. If I was a homeowner and I got this opportunity, it would be, I select the plant, I plant the plant, and I maintain the plant. But if there was a right of way, I thought we had discussed a maintenance option on right of way as well as the planning. Is that correct?
That could be planning in the right of way might be a separate series of,
Okay.
who's responsible for what, than planning in a homeowner's yard.
Yep.
Whether, rapid transit people would do the plannings themselves and take responsibility for the initial 3-year maintenance, let's say, for trees in the right of way might make sense. But it might not make sense for trees that are planted in a homeowner's yard where it would be off the street and sort of invasive for someone that's having to maintain. In those cases, we would have to provide education and outreach around how to properly maintain the tree, and then let the homeowner be responsible.
But I think, as Betsy was kind of pointing out earlier, we do run the possibility of, if we plant trees in the right of way, you're then telling the homeowner in 3 years to pick up your responsibility, and you've got to comply.
Yes.
And that's not something I'm sure we want to do.
So I think that would be subject to discussion, but yeah, I actually think that might be an okay thing. Because they are getting benefits. What we need to do around education is let people know the benefits of trees, not just some generic benefit of living in a community without trees, but there are benefits for living in a neighborhood where there are trees close to your house, mitigating overheating, enhancing wildlife, variety of things, reducing storm damage, high wind or water runoff. Imagine sorts of things.
Yeah, I think education is a good idea. If somebody really doesn't want to be planted in the right of way in front of their house because they don't want to be responsible for maintaining it in 2 years, 3 years. That's
I think the choice of
the
tree.
elected officials in the town might not.
I think the way to do this would have a limited set of trees that would, after 3 or 5 years of probably maintenance, be on the city dime, would be relatively maintenance free. Right? Not all trees require, a lot of things, a lot of maintenance, or watering or excessive pruning. There are trees one to choose. That would be good choices in that. Be relatively low maintenance. Anyone else have anything to add to this? Okay, reports and announcements. I guess this is where we see the that's all right. I think that's one to
One more.
And in the future, it would be really nice if we had street addresses for where these were, just so that we can have some idea where in the town, city they are, or if we wanted to, you know, take a look at them ourselves, which I actually have done some in the past. I've seen tree removal permits through pending.
Yeah, I can include the address. I think the most interesting one that came in that I'd call out is there's one that's like right on the shoreline. And so our shoreline master program applies for kind of the regulations on how to address that tree, which differs pretty significantly than our critical area code in Lake Forest Park Municipal Code. So for board members that aren't super familiar with our SMP, it would be a good piece of Lake Forest Park information to be acquainted with. It's specifically in chapter 6 that talks about trees in the shoreline.
These are invasive trees. If you talk about the third one here, those are holly is technically an invasive tree, so they should be able to get rid of it anyway. Or
I'm not-
Basic species list.
it's
It's not, it should be, but.
yeah, but it is. I looked at it. Experienced today. Looked at it.
I had to get rid of that. Destroy it.
Yeah.
And I had to get rid of it.
Well, holly trees should definitely be on the invasive species list if they are.
And I need
Yep.
to be wrong.
Holly trees are definitely on the invasive species list and are always managed as such. I'm not really sure where that came in because I'm not looking at what you're looking at right now. Which project?
I think I may be wrong. It doesn't say you. That's being invasive is an excuse for taking it out, but it doesn't mean you don't have to replace it. So maybe I should probably mention that.
So that
It's an improvement to replace a holly with something that's not invasive.
it's an improvement to remove a holly, whether it's replaced or not.
But it has to be replaced something. So Lake Forest Park.
So this is 2023 tree 0037, is that the?
I'm not sure what your question is about that.
Well, it says a permit to remove 2 significant holly trees.
Yep,
And
that's
2 trees being planted to replace them.
Yep.
So is the requirement for removal of invasive species that they be replaced with trees? of other
It dep-
species?
It depends on if it's a major or minor. Our minor permits require a 1-for-1 tree replacement. Our major permits require tree replacement if it causes the canopy coverage goal for the specific parcel size to drop below the goal.
And it really doesn't matter if the tree that's being taken out is invasive or not.
Correct.
Perhaps it should, but it doesn't at this point.
6-inch holly is a pretty darn big holly.
And I would say, besides the stuff that's on the list that I printed out for you, I've been very busy with tree planting inspections this month as I've been really trying to get at least all the permits I've issued since I've started, making sure that everyone got them planted before things really start getting heated up and summer takes over. So I've been very busy making sure everyone's getting their trees in the ground. And I'm working with our permitting programming software to help me create a better way of exporting a list so I can better manage kind of making sure that people are getting their trees planted and inspections are getting checked off.
I like having this little explanation of what the thing is. That's very helpful.
Okay. Great. And then there was one other thing I wanted to mention to you guys, and I'll send out an email to the tree board. But I've been working with Sound Transit, trying to get one of their representatives or arborists to come to the one of our tree board meetings. They were working on trying to get someone to tonight's meeting, but they were unsuccessful. So they told me that they will make sure that someone comes to the June meeting. But they just requested that any questions you have kind of regarding the new bus lane, if you can send me any questions you have, by the end of this week, I will forward them on to our contact with Sound Transit, and they'll work on kind of getting answers together. And then they'll have one of their representatives or the arborist come to the June meeting and talk to you.
Good, thank you. Anything else under reports or announcements? Anna, do you have anything else for us? Okay. Anybody have any agenda items for next meeting that they want to raise? You can, Larry Goldman has a hand raised.
Yeah, two quick things for me. First, last week, the city council passed an ordinance that adds alternates to all of the boards, including the tree board. That way there can be up to 7 normal tree standard members plus 2 alternates. It'll make it easier to maintain quorum, and it'll also be a more seamless transfer if someone needs to step down in the middle of their term. There'll be someone right away to replace them. And the second, I think this is more for Steve. I got a comment from a member of the public. They appreciate the roll plots that list all the trees, but they find it a little hard to understand. And they're wondering, is there a more easily digestible version that shows where the trees are going to be removed? And that's it. That's it for me.
Do you have a response to that, Steve?
Well, I think that, that's kind of what we hope to get out of this code. And it's just form in that plan. Hopefully we'll, once council adopts it, we'll get where we're running. All right, anybody who has agenda items before the next meeting, send them to me or to Ryan or George. Get them on the agenda. And we look forward to maybe having Mark join us formally. That approval goes through, and that's it. I hope that your
We shall see.
application gets acted on soon. So if there's nothing else, do I hear a move to adjourn? Okay. Second, all in favor of adjourn? All right, thank you all. Thanks. Thank you. Did Julia put you off the list?